Nightfam, this is the incredible story of Japan's most impressive prison escapist. A man who escaped 4 of the most high-security prisons in the country and whose creative skills and intellect ran circles around law enforcement for years. A man who suffered torment, punishment, and injustice at the hand of the system without even being proven guilty in the first place. This is the legend of Yoshi Shiatori, the man no prison could hold. At the height of World War II, Shiatori arrived at Arabashi Prison, better known as the most brutal and secure prison in Japan. Now, this place was located in some of the most northern parts of Japan. On the inside, the levels of cruelty and brutality carried out by the guards are next to unspeakable, with beatings, starvation, torture, and death being just ordinary things every single day. If someone somehow managed to find their way out of this horrible prison, then the extremely harsh temperature and hostile wildlife in the surrounding area would quickly make their escape a fruitless one. And to make Shiatori's escape case even worse, he was known already as an escape artist. He'd broken out of 2 prisons before, and the authorities had a cell designed just to hold him. There were no windows, the walls were completely smooth, the doors reinforced, and his only glimpse into the world outside his cell was the narrow slit in the doors used to deliver the meals. And to top it all off, his legs and arms were always shackled up. Without a key or keyhole, the only way they could be removed is with the help of a specialist who came in every week to remove them and let Shiatori bathe. Always chained in a cell so blank it threatened to drive him mad, this was a corner of hell created just for him. So, with all these security measures in place, how did Shiatori plan to escape? Well, it's hard to believe, but the answer is rather simple. Soup was his escape plan. See, the prisoners were often given miso soup as a meal, and while to others this warm meal would be their rare and cherished comfort in an extremely brutal place, in the hands of Shiatori, this was his key to escape. One of the defining features of the soup was just how much salt it contained. Meaning, if applied long enough to iron, it would slowly begin to rust it. So, for an entire year, Yoshi smeared the soup over his bonds and the screws of the small door slit every time the soup came. The first step of his plan was completed. But even with his hands and legs free, he still had to get out of his cell, let alone escape Japan's answer to Alcatraz. So during a blackout in the prison, seeing this one single moment of weakness in the prison's security, our escape artist seized the chance and began his escape. Pulling out the now rusted screws on the doors, Shiatori dislocated his shoulders and slid through the small slit. And then he sulked through the darkness into freedom, if you can call it that way. Cold, snowy, hostile freedom. Now, the crazy thing about all of this is that he was actually framed. He wasn't guilty, and he now had another chance at life. A slim one, but a chance. After all, he had a home, a wife, and a son to get back to. And not to mention, he still had to clear his name. So, after 2 years of solitude, Shiatori descended from the snow-covered mountains and into civilization, only to find it completely different. Imagine the confusion he must have felt coming from the wild into the civilization. Put yourself in his shoes for a moment to feel the story that will keep on developing and evolving for you, my dear viewer. He was still on the run and he had nothing on him other than his clothes. Unfortunately, when Shiratori was driven by hunger, he was spotted trying to steal food from a local farmer. The police was called and Shiratori was arrested and put on trial. Again, for his many crimes and the 3 successful prison escapes prior. Yoshi Shiratori was sentenced to death. He would await his execution in Sapporo prison. Once again, he was back to square one in a small cell. This escape artist could not escape again, could he? Most of you will say that it is impossible he would manage to escape again, right? Well, by this time the authorities had enough of Shiratori. The cell he was kept in was under constant watch, completely windowless, and learning from the previous escapes, the slit used for food was made smaller than his head. He was not getting out of this one, or so at least the authorities thought. See, Shiratori realized one thing. Previously, he always exploited one of the weaknesses of the actual prison, a rusty door or a crack in the walls. There was always something for him to use in his escape. This time, the weakness were the guards themselves. If he wanted to avoid his execution, he would have to play his guards. Hiya. Before we go back to the video, if you could please do me a favor and subscribe to After Nightfall right now, I would appreciate it. We are currently at 17,000 subscribers and we want to reach 100k by the end of the year. So if you appreciate what we do and you agree with some of the people who comment that After Nightfall is one of the most underrated channels on YouTube, then help us out, get us up in the algorithm and subscribe right now. Thank you so much. Until his date of execution, Yoshi made it seem like he had given up. The guards watching him day and night thought he'd fallen depressed, finally realizing the consequences that awaited him. He stayed in bed all day, refused to eat or even get up when called by the guards. But secretly, this guy is an insane escape artist. When nobody was looking, in the deep hours of the night, Shiratori removed the floorboards of his cell and began to dig. You can imagine now just how shocked the guards were when they looked into his cell one day and found it empty. Yoshi Shiratori escaped once again. The next year he spent on the run again, constantly looking over his shoulder. Once things had calmed down and his name slowly began to fade from public consciousness, he started looking for work again. But he couldn't find anything. He was a suspicious man with a fake name and next to no experience at 40 years old. He wasn't just starting over from scratch. He was a foreigner in his own country. Seeing no hope of success, prospect, even just making ends meet, Shiratori's spirit finally faltered. And one day he found himself sitting on a park bench next to a police officer. The man was friendly, kind, making light conversation with no idea that he was sitting to the most incredible escape artist in the entire country. And then in the middle of this conversation he offered Shiratori a cigarette. A small gesture for us today, but at the time cigarettes were extremely expensive in Japan. And this man was offering it freely. This random act of kindness, one stranger to another, deeply moved Shiratori. For years, he'd been completely alone, running from one hiding place to another, from one prison to another. It had been so long since anyone acted kindly towards him, and for this kindness to come from a police officer, from someone whose colleagues Yoshi ran from and hated for years. The man finally broke down, told the officer who he was, his entire life story, and turned himself in. But yet, the most surprising fact is that when he was on trial, the court was actually fair. Not only were many of the charges against him dropped, including the initial murder charge that got him into prison in the first place, but when he was sentenced, he wasn't placed in some far-off hellhole where he would be abused and beaten. No, he was put in a much better prison in Tokyo. And for the next 15 years, Shiratori served out his sentence as a model inmate. No incidents, no breakouts, nothing. He was even released on good behavior. Now, Shiratori's story reminds us of just how quickly a life can go wrong. He came from poverty, forced into petty crime by circumstance, and framed for murder he never even carried out. And for years, the vicious cycle continued, only broken by one sudden act of kindness from a stranger. Today, Shiratori isn't remembered as a criminal or a fugitive. He's a reminder of how easy it is for lives and humanity to be disregarded and forgotten in the justice system, and to what lengths people will go to achieve their freedom.